Hello, all. So, I'm holding off making a lot of the martial arts videos because I'm trying to still get somebody I can work with here, or it won't be that long until I'm in a situation where 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 we need to be moved, and I'll work to find somebody there. So, I'm just trying to figure out sort of the whether it's worth it to look here now since we're going to be relocating. But with that being said, I wanted to make a quick video about something which I think is really important. I want people to understand. You hear a lot of different narratives in the media, um, a lot of things about money, the feds, Bitcoin, etc. You have to have a realistic understanding of value to guide you through these times. And I'm going to explain to you some things that apply, and they're a way that you can understand the mechanics of the system and hopefully take advantage of them, okay? First of all these economic theories, such things, throw them out the window, okay? Ask yourself a very simple question. In the 1950s in this country, how many people had to go to work to support the basic necessities of a family? Okay? One person did. Okay? Today, how many people have to go to work to support the necessities of a family? Usually at least both parents. And increasingly we're getting into a situation where through YouTube, through other different hacks, you can see that people at a very young age are sort of being pushed into this idea, this mindset of getting into the rat race. That's not by accident, okay? The people that really control power in this world, they're not a country, okay? So you get these people now talking about America, the West, versus the Muslims, versus the... Don't buy any of that crap. The people who really control things, they don't have a national border, they don't have a religious border, okay? And it's to their interest for everybody to be working and be somewhat enslaved. If you think about it, your life, you're expected to work for a living, okay? You're expected to sacrifice your time here during this existence for those people that have the means. There's nothing written in stone about that situation or relationship. So, when you hear all these things about particulars, like the Republicans, the Democrats, the people who are pushing the narrative about gender and race versus, it's all just a bunch of diversion. The people that really have control and power in this world, you don't know who they are or where they are, okay? What you see are stand-ins for them. And you will find through your experience that it's very deliberate. Nobody wants you ever to really see who's in control. You cannot know who the enemy is. And I say enemy because if you're not in that group, then you're being exploited. Doesn't matter what country you come from, doesn't matter what nationality, what religion, okay? Behavior of people who are extreme exists in all religious categories, okay? Including, even in a very contradictory way, things like Hinduism, which is a religion of peace, yet you have Hindu extremists, right? Think about that for a moment if you understand how absurd that is. Okay, you have it there's no real category that avoids unless you renounce the world, okay? And I had a chance to do that, everybody does. when I entered a Buddhist monastery for some time, and that is a path. However, the problem with that is that you're in this world, and it seems to me, kind of silly to renounce the world, given that you're in the world. I'd rather try to help and make the world a better place. So, with that being said, let's look at real economic value. People will tell you things about money, our debt, how it affects money, about gold, about currencies, okay, about Bitcoin, cyber currencies. It you have to understand something. The people that have real value don't care about money. They have things that have value. Things that have value always have value, okay? So while the world is getting larger and the pie is getting smaller, if you own the pie, it doesn't really affect you the same way it affects people who have to transact with different parts of the pie, if that makes any sense. When you look at economic value, think about a few things, okay? How does your environment dictate value? So, for example, if there is a real problem and people cannot get basic necessities, at that point, soap and toilet paper are worth a lot more than gold, okay? It's relative, right? Some metals, they do actually have more value than currencies. However, the same applies. You can't do much with a chunk of gold, okay? It just, we agree that it has value, and that's why it has value. When you go to currencies, you're taking that same principle on a much more imminent scale. You know, you transact dollars for goods and services. You know, in this country during the Civil War, you had different currencies, and some had more and less value according to different states. So it has a very relative and fluctuating nature. So don't get caught into that trap. If you want value, the only thing you can really do is buy property, real estate. And I'm telling you that because real estate is like the pie, okay? You can't make more of it yet until we go into space. Then things might change considerably, but that's down the road. Right now, in this present economic situation, the people that have the most power have real estate interests for a reason. And that is because real estate has real value. It has scarcity, and that does not change. It only becomes more scarce. So the quickest way to make money quickly and to change your status economically is always going to be through real estate. Now, I'm not necessarily telling you to go out and buy land, but I'm just explaining to you why that works that way. And if you understand that it works that way, you'll understand that the powers that control, in order for them to control their real estate interests, they have to give you certain rights and privileges. So, for example, if you have a piece of property in a very nice area, they can charge you very expensive taxes, okay? But they have to still give you the same ownership rights that they have. Otherwise, there's nothing stopping the masses from granting or not granting the ownership interests of the elites without force. You understand how that works? In other words, if I want to be able to develop and buy property in New York City, and I expect legal protections, I have to afford those same protections to everybody to create the illusion that there's equality in society. So I want you to keep that in mind. How do you deal with that? What's the best way to deal with that? There's a couple of things you can do. First of all, cryptocurrencies are a better storehouse of value because they are international. So they are not a bad thing to do at this point in history. The dollar has basically gone to a point where it's losing value, and you're going to need something more international. And the cryptocurrencies are the best things for that at this moment. Okay? Precious metals aren't bad, but what do you do if you have gold and it goes up? Do you just sell it? And where do you put it after that? This is what you have to think about. Where do you park things once they gain value? Okay? If you can find and educate yourself about property, learn about taking a broker's test in your state, just to understand how the laws work, etc. And then you can look at trying to find a way to have valuable property, or any property that there's a really good chance it will rise in value in the future. It has the assets you need. That's one of the best strategies you can do to kind of give yourself an advantage in this fight against the oppressors. And there's no other way to put it. Every day everybody goes to work, and they're not going to work for their own interests. If you don't think that's a form of slavery, that's okay. I do. I think it is. I want to work for my interests, not for the Rockefellers, for the Amazon, for whatever. Okay? Anyway, I want you to think about this, and I want you to understand that all these economic theories come down to very basic facts. Ask yourself, one, economically, how many people need to go to work today versus starting in the 1960s or so, early 70s? Ask yourself what in your environment has real value, temporarily at least. If there's a crisis, if you have soap and toilet paper, you might get rich. Do you know who the richest people were during the gold mine expansion? The people who sold the miners food and clothing accessories. Then think about, if you want any sort of relationship with currency, crypto is a much more international format than any particular dollar at this point. And it's necessary at this point because they cannot control the slide of national currencies in this country, in America, any more than anywhere else at this point. And then ask yourself what has real value in when you control it. What do the people that have real money control? They control real estate, and they work and make sure there are tax conditions that are favorable to their assets. So another aspect of this, which we can get into sometime, has to do with how you protect your assets. But for now, just take this information and work with it, okay? Thank you. Take care.